Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
2, 1, 0, all engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower clear. Here we go.
But other sightings apparently were taken more seriously.
And one in particular, an incident called the Rendlesham Forest Incident, also known as Britain's Roswell. This was in 1980, shortly after Christmas, when a few American airmen who were stationed in the UK reported seeing a UFO.
A huge, solid, diamond-shaped object they described as 100 foot long, hovering silently in the sky above them.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone, whatever that means.
American public and global public finally understands UFOs are real. This is a technology that is so far beyond anything that we have.
Reportedly appear to exhibit unusual flight characteristics, appear to demonstrate advanced technology.
AARO is the culmination of decades of DoD, intelligence community, and congressionally directed efforts to successfully resolve UAP encountered first and foremost by U.S. military.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to Disclosure Team. I'm your host, Vinny Adams. The following is an interview with Matt Ford. Matt is the host of The Good Trouble Show on YouTube. He can also be found on most major podcast platforms. In this video, we discuss many of the recent happenings in the UFO UAP field, and we also touch upon Havana syndrome, which is something that's been back in the news recently with a great 60 minutes piece. If you enjoy this content, please just take a second, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, comment anything you want down below, and share the videos with your friends. I really appreciate it. It really helps just keep the channel going. I hope you enjoy this interview with Matt Ford. All right, Matt, welcome back to the show. It's good to have you back. How's things?
Very well, Vinny. Yeah, it's good to see you again. I always tell everyone that you and Dan Zetterstrom were my very first guests on the Good Trouble Show, and I remember like how freaking nervous I was. I had never like interviewed anybody before like that, and to me, you guys were like UAP royalty. So yeah, man, it's good to see you, and things are good. We just finished up probably about 2 hours ago a really great interview with Washington, D.C. attorney Mark Zaid. And I'm not sure if you guys get 60 Minutes in the in the UK, but 60 Minutes is a very long-running news magazine show here in the United States. And they did, I think it was the end of last month, they did a really great story regarding Havana syndrome, which they now refer to as anomalous health injuries. And Mark is an attorney in Washington, D.C., who has represented multiple whistleblowers. A lot of his clients are folks from DOD, FBI, intelligence, and whatnot. The guy even has a security clearance, so he is able to see a lot of classified product. Anyway, he was on 60 Minutes last week, where they had their kind of like first update regarding Havana or AHI. It's their first update in 3 years since their original story. And man, I have to tell you, it was a probably next to interviewing you, probably one of the best interviews that I've ever had. It was really great, and we spoke about UAP, of course. He's offered to represent UAP whistleblowers, and has been advising other lawyers in Washington that are representing whistleblowers in the UAP field. But yeah, man, it was a wide-ranging interviews. We spoke about that, spoke about the CIA, spoke about how there are probably very common reasons that the CIA is covering up Havana syndrome. I'll keep calling it Havana syndrome because that's what I've been used to. Havana syndrome and the UAP issue, all for very similar sets of reasons that totally make sense. But yeah, great interview. Took a little nap afterwards, and I'm back with you.
Ah, that's great. I mean, we don't get 60 minutes, but I always try and find it to kind of watch these important segments. So, yeah. So let's stick with this story because Havana syndrome is something I've been trying to keep an eye on for the past few years, but there doesn't seem to be much out there. There's obviously a few theories about it, but what do you find is kind of the current direction and thoughts that people are having about the origins of this strange thing?
Well, it appears to be from what he shared. It appears to be some kind of directed energy microwave weapon. And in the 60 Minutes report that came out last month, they had a gentleman from the Pentagon that actually ran an investigation into all of these Havana syndrome cases, and it all pointed to Russia. And what was interesting in the interview that he brought up, which I had forgotten about, was there was back in I think it was either the 80s or 1970s, the Russian government presented to the new ambassador from the United States, presented to him this kind of, I think it was like a very artistic looking United States seal. And his counterpart in Russia gave our ambassador this seal as kind of a welcoming gift to coming to Russia and being the new United States ambassador to Russia. So I take it that the technical surveillance people at State Department ran tests on it, didn't find any bugs or any kind of electronic emissions, so they hang this thing on their wall. Well, unbeknownst to the United States, Russia had planted, and I'm not quite sure how it worked, some kind of passive feedback mechanism that when it was hit with a beam of focused microwave energy, it would excite this passive receptor that was hidden inside of this emblem or whatever this thing was that was hanging above the ambassador's desk. So it turned into this listening device, but I guess because of the microwave technology, it didn't emit anything back that was detectable in terms of like maybe what a normal bug would emit, some kind of RF energy. So the point that he was making is that Russia, for a very long time, had invested in microwave technology. And that was one of the first known cases of that being used. So in essence, it seems to be tied to Russia. One thing that they do know is that a focused microwave energy somehow can be used to retrieve data off of cell phones and off of computers. And there is some thinking that perhaps the people that were targeted with these devices, they were really kind of the byproduct. The target was whatever their electronic devices was that they were operating, be it a laptop or a phone, etc. So it's a really fascinating case, and he discussed the fact that all of this has gone way back for a very long time. There's quite a history of it, and that the CIA just simply does not want to deal with it, much in the same way that I think that they don't want to deal with the UAP issue. I think it's there are certain subjects that our government seems much more comfortable in just burying their head rather than facing certain consequences. So, for instance, in the case of anomalous health injuries that can be traced back to Russia, the fact that a lot of people that were being targeted and that have been victim to this were people in our national security establishment, people that were in the administration. For instance, I'm friends. Been good friends with a lady by the name of Olivia Troy, who was Mike Pence's Homeland Security advisor when she was in the Trump administration. She was featured in the original 60 Minutes piece 3 years ago, and discussed how when she was walking from I think it's the Eisenhower building to the West Wing in the White House, she was hit with Havana as soon as she walked outside, and had experienced 2 separate attacks in the parking lot near the White House subsequent to that. There were other officials in the Trump administration that had been targeted as well. One, I think, was the chief of staff for the Department of Homeland Security, and others. And it's not. And I bring up the Trump administration just because I know Olivia, but this has happened with the current administration and others. It's not. They're not targeting one particular party, but it has been going on. These folks have suffered physical injury. And I think one of the things that is truly the saddest about it is that not only have these diplomats and intelligence officials and people, working for the FBI and et cetera, that have been stationed on these overseas assignments, not only have they been injured by this, but their families who have gone on these duty assignments. So people's husbands and wives, and sadly even families' children, have been hit with these electronic warfare attacks, and even their pets. He described one instance of one of the children that was a member of a family who was stationed overseas that was hit with this, and this child is damaged for life. It is truly truly disconcerting. And one of the issues, of course, is if all of this is traceable back to Russia, and which it sounds like it is, and they are clearly targeting the top 5% of our government officials. These aren't like the kind of underachieving people in the intelligence community or the Pentagon. These are all the top tier people. It begs to question that our national security is at risk when you have a foreign adversary that can attack your national leadership with an electronic weapon, and the CIA just decides to cover it up and bury their head in the sand because they do not want to, of course, go down the decision path of, okay, well, if this is indeed Russia and we have solid proof, does that constitute an act of war? And then all of a sudden we find ourselves in a shooting match with Russia. So I understand it's a complex problem, but the fact that you have the Central Intelligence Agency actively lying to Congress about this, the fact that you have the Central Intelligence Agency lying to Congress about the UAP issue, the fact that you have the Central Intelligence Agency who has not even shared classified data with its sister organizations regarding Havana syndrome, anomalous health incidents. That just tells you that this entire organization, or at least the leadership, in my opinion, is not operating in the best interest of the United States of America. And certainly I think that that's apparent when you have an organization like that and the Pentagon in suit following it right behind them that are downplaying it, saying it doesn't exist. They are throwing under the bus the men and women that serve our country, and keep all of us safe. That's exactly what they're doing, and there's a long history of that. You had the Pentagon and the CIA denying that there were any injuries from burn pits in Iraq. You had the CIA and the Pentagon denying that there were any injuries regarding post-concussive syndrome from munitions going off near our men and women in uniform. So there's a long history of our government, in particular the CIA, of really doing some dirty things that I think are un-American and fly in the face of any democracy, whether you're in the United Kingdom or America or elsewhere.
That is scary, worrisome, troubling. That is unbelievable. I mean, is there any data out there that points to the actual individuals being targeted with these weapons, or does it seem like they're just aimed at a certain important location, and somebody of some importance is bound to kind of walk into the zone where this beam is kind of focused on?
They appear to be targeted attacks. In particular, what Mark Zaid indicated was the common thread, and this guy that left the Pentagon, this official that left the Pentagon that had run the investigation there, they both said the common thread was all of these officials, intelligence officials, FBI officials, and whatnot that had been attacked were all actively involved in some kind of Russia counter-espionage investigation. So in the 60 Minutes report that came out 3 weeks ago, they discussed that one individual that was pulled over by the police in Florida, it turned out to be a Russian spy. And he had connections to this particular group. It's got a number behind it, but it's a particular directorate under the Russian intelligence service that they're tasked with things like electronic attack. They're tasked with assassinations, things like that. And they found some kind of document. It's in the 60 Minutes segment where this document directly ties this directorate and the intelligence agency in Russia to these electronic attacks. So Russia does appear to be the culprit in all of this, as far as what information has been shared so far.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's good that we have individuals like him who are actually, actively working to get this, to do it right, to get this, made public. And I'm baffled by that.
It's truly baffling, and the thing, and this is part of the reason why they decided to call it anomalous health injuries, is that it's kind of like how the flu of 1812 or whatever year it was called the Spanish flu. Well, I guess Spain was not really it wasn't because Spain did something. It's the same thing. It's not because this was something generated in Havana. It was given the name because one of the first publicized cases was in Havana, Cuba. But what Mark shared is that this had gone on for decades before, and it's not tied to. It's not tied to Cuba. That was just the moniker that was that people used because that was the first first public case of an injury related to this microwave attack.
Yeah, and I suppose one thing, if this has been going on for so long, then as with anything, the way that technology is evolving, that's a very dangerous, ever evolving technology that can only get worse if it's not dealt with. I mean,
absolutely. I mean, and he brought up one good point, is that you can do damage to your adversary without having to kill them. It's a non-lethal form of warfare. It is an asymmetric form of warfare. For instance, Miles, I'm blanking on his last name, but who was the chief of staff for the Department of Homeland Security in the Trump administration, he was attacked twice in his apartment in Washington, D.C. The first time he woke up to this ringing that apparently sounds a lot like crickets, and he gets up, he's disoriented, and he immediately goes to his window, looks outside, and he said this was around 3:30 in the morning, and sees this white van, unmarked white van, speed away. And it sounds as if this particular weapon can be deployed, by a single person. From how I understand it, it does not have to be a big emitter, It's it's something that could be handheld. So the fact that you've got Russian agents running around that are either targeting the people or targeting their electronic devices to vacuum up data that's in them with these microwave weapons. Yeah, man, it is truly disconcerting, and to me it would sound like it would absolutely be an act of war, considered an act of war, if we had undeniable proof that it is, that it is Russia. And I'll also point out as well, Olivia Troy, who I mentioned, was targeted right outside of the Eisenhower building. And the Eisenhower building is on one side of a parking lot strip, a long parking lot strip, and then the west wing of the White House is on the other side. Well, this parking lot strip, the president walks around as well. So the fact that you consider that the president of the United States can walk outside of the White House, of supposedly secure area, and be targeted by this microwave device, man, it is really frightening. And and if you tease it out even further, let's say that we are coming super close to a armed conflict with Russia, and like super close to World War III, and you've got all of the national security apparatus sitting in the White House deciding what to do. Well, these Russian agents feasibly could go sit outside in the ellipse and target these individuals in the White House with these weapons and incapacitate our national leadership. And man, if that is not a cause for concern and a threat to national security, I don't know what is. But the fact that you have the CIA and the Pentagon blowing this off. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence issued a report late last year, I think it was in October, essentially stating that this was likely caused by pre-existing conditions or mass hysteria, or the debunkers like Mick West and the Center for Inquiry. I'm blanking on the guy's name who wrote an article for Skeptic Inquirer. All of these folks. Well, Mick West says it's just people getting old and it's ringing in their ear, if you can believe that. And then the Center for Inquiry guy that wrote an article regarding Havana syndrome essentially says it's one giant psychogenic illness, sort of a mass hysteria.
Oh, is that sorry to interrupt. Was that Bartholomew?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That guy who, yeah. So, it just blows your mind, and it makes you wonder, why do these guys sit and do this all day long? Mick West. And the thing that they completely ignore is that number one, all of these victims, the symptoms were an immediate onset. It wasn't like a chronic disease that progressed over time, or a pre-existing condition that maybe started with milder symptoms and then escalated. The onset of the injury was immediate. And the fact that you've got children being injured that have permanent damage, pets, spouses, how these bananas debunkers, I mean, they're crazy enough with what they say about the UFO stuff, but how they can logically, publicly state that all of this is just a mass hysteria, while ignoring all of the data by children being injured and spouses being injured. It's frankly inhumane and just inconsiderate. And it's one thing for somebody to argue or make a silly argument without evidence, debunking UFOs. I mean, that's to be expected. But in this realm, where you're dealing with people that have been physically injured while being employed by the United States government, is quite frankly unexcusable. And while I'm on that rant, one of the other things that I also brought up as well is the Guerrilla Skeptics, run by Susan Gerbic, who, of course, runs this giant outfit of 200 or so Wikipedia editors, and that they I've spoken extensively how they've targeted the UAP pages on Wikipedia, such as David Grush, Lou Elizondo, et cetera. But they've also targeted the Havana syndrome page on Wikipedia. And as a matter of fact, they have generated the Havana page apparently right now is one of the top, like one of the top 5, I'm guessing, most searched pages on Wikipedia. Well, the Guerrilla Skeptics have gone, Susan Gerbich's Guerrilla Skeptics, they have gone and locked the page out from any edits for like a 2-month period. Why? Because they don't want, they're trying to cover this stuff up. You've got, we believe, and we don't know this for a fact, but there's a Stanford doctor, medical doctor, who supervised 2 of the government initial government studies on Havana syndrome that conducted extensive medical research. Well, they've locked that guy out from putting up his relevant research. It's just bananas. Rob Heatherly and Craig Weiler have been doing a considerable amount of work. They have a team behind them that are looking into what the Guerrilla Skeptics are doing, but just the mass targeting of Wikipedia in order to just kind of weaponize it on behalf of the debunkers, the professional debunkers, as I like to call them. It is just absolutely insane. And the fact that they're doing this regarding people that are being physically injured by this is frankly obscene.
Yeah, absolutely. So you recorded that interview today. When will that air?
Okay, so our interview with attorney Mark Zaid, that will air this coming Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific. It's a little bit over an hour long, but it is packed with new information regarding Havana. Again, we talk about the UAP aspect. We talk extensively about the CIA and what they've been up to. Yeah, man, your viewers are not going to want to miss it. It's a really great interview.
Fantastic. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to pop a link in the description below where people can go and bookmark it as of now, because I think this interview will come out before that. So yeah,
awesome.
Really looking forward to that, Matt.
Thank you.
Now let's jump on to something which I know you're interested in, because you put out a 5-minute video on it yesterday, and this is the Eglin Air Force Base.
Right, yeah.
So this is this was brought up by Matt Gaetz at the last congressional hearing. He had taken Luna and Burchett down to Eglin, and they were denied access to images. They'd heard about this case, denied access to the pilots and the servicemen related to it. And if I'm right, these 4 objects were witnessed on radar in a diamond formation, and then one of the objects was witnessed by the pilot, and I think a couple of the optical sensors captured some imagery, not very good imagery,
right?
Let's say. So yeah, do you want to take it from there? How does this play out up until where we are now? I've got it in front of me, this case resolution document that came out from AARO.
yeah AARO, which I referred to in my latest commentary video as the Pentagon's in-house bullshit factory, produced this report that supposedly solved this case. Now, they do talk, essentially the theory is that it was a balloon, and they did list that it could be an atmospheric balloon. However, what they seem to be hanging their hat on is that it is a what we call an HMI or helium film balloon. And I've used these things in my day job. I work in television lighting shows as a designer. I've used these things in the past, and essentially what they are is it's a helium balloon. Let's just say you're lighting the inside of a giant ballroom, or you're lighting the outside of a castle. The way that you would do that to simulate the moon the same quality of moonlight because it puts out a very soft light, is this giant helium balloon. And the balloons come in different shapes and sizes. Some of them are quite large, 30 feet or so. One looks like a Tic Tac. It could totally be, I think, mistaken for a Tic Tac. It's white, it's oval. The difference is on the top part of the balloon is a kind of black reflector or shade. So it's black on the outside, but it's silvered on the inside to bounce the light back down. So the way these things work, number one, you can't purchase them. They are rental items. There are only two companies here in the United States that produce these things. One is Airstar USA, which I've used, a great company. The second is a competitor that I'm not familiar with. But essentially, when you hire them, they show up, a technician from the company shows up to your film set with the balloon, not inflated, of course. You tell them, as the designer or director of photography, you tell them, okay, I want this balloon floated above this football field or whatever. And then the technician figures out how they're going to tether it, how high they're going to float it and whatnot. The technician, with the help of the union stagehands, they set the balloon up, they tether it. The guy inflates it with helium and attaches the electrical cord, because these things require AC electricity, ground electricity, and they float this thing up. So it's tethered not only by whatever cabling is used on 4 points to physically keep the thing from floating away, but also by this heavy gauge electrical cable that runs up to it. Now, I can tell you from people that I spoke with that none of these vendors have ever lost a balloon. There was one instance that was related, that one did get a gust of wind and was pulled loose of some of its tethers, and the crew was able to recover it, but it never flew away. Now, one of the other things that the AARO Bullshit Factory put out was that they acknowledged that these things used a light source that required ground power, but they speculated that these things could be converted to battery use. Now, number one, Airstar, they do have smaller balloons that have an LED source inside, that do have a battery pack, but this battery pack weighs 50 pounds. It doesn't sit in the balloon, it sits on the ground. So this isn't something that a balloon that happens to have a battery inside of that size can just float up over Eglin Air Force Base. That's not how, that's not how these balloons work. Finally, backing up a bit, the electrical power that these things require, at a minimum, is around 1,600 watts or 1,200 watts of power. It's about 15 amps at 120 volts. The balloons that I used in my previous day job, these consumed 12,000 watts of power. You had to send 3-phase power up to, which is what you would use in like an industrial warehouse, 3-phase power, up to this giant balloon that had this arc source in it. And that was before LED technology had evolved. And right. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Sean Kirkpatrick, before leaving AARO, had referenced some case from like 15 years ago, where he said that it could have been one of these film balloons that got loose. But again, it just doesn't happen. And I think the most important point is that these balloons, in my discussion with the balloon manufacturers, the helium that is in there versus the weight of the balloon and the reflector inside and whatever other things are inside of it. For instance, the light source, the highest altitude any of these balloons can achieve is 5,000 feet above ground level. They noted that it doesn't matter what the atmospheric conditions are, they will always top out at around 5,000 feet. They just can't go any higher. Doesn't matter barometric pressure, wind, etc. That is the limit, the physical limit of what the helium can take that type of balloon up. Now, weather balloon obviously is a totally different story. I know nothing about weather balloons, but essentially they AARO, and I think all of us were kind of hopeful that once Sean Kirkpatrick left, and we know what the amount of incompetent leadership he had, or he was running there as the director of AARO. We were hoping that maybe with this new guy things would be different, but it doesn't appear to be the same, because this whole explanation of it being a film balloon is just utter baloney. And I make fun of the debunkers. I don't consider myself a debunker, but hey, Mick West, maybe you'll appreciate the fact that I actually debunked. I did some good debunking there. So there you go.
No wonder. And I think this object was spotted between 16,000 and 18,000 feet. So very different to the 5,000 that you mentioned there. And, it begs the question, why were these Congress people denied access? This is all very cloak and dagger, and it just doesn't make any sense.
It does not make any sense. But for instance, the recent drone incursions over Langley Air Force Base that the Air Force, I think, or the Pentagon stated were of, I think the quote was, various sizes and configurations. They labeled these things as unmanned aerial systems, but I am telling you, these things are UAPs. That are likely cloaking or doing some form of signature management to appear as drones. None of the evidence points to these being some sort of terrestrial explanation, and that was something that actually I got into that comment or that discussion with somebody else in the intelligence community that I can't talk about. I was getting it confused with what I talked to Mark about, but yeah, there is absolutely no way that these are drones. So much in the same way that I think the Pentagon, the DoD, the IC is trying to explain away these drone incursions over Langley Air Force Base and telling Congress there's nothing to see here. They're doing the exact same thing with this report from AARO regarding the Eglin Air Force Base. At the end of the day, the sole purpose, in my opinion, of the Pentagon Public Affairs Office and the CIA, which is the portfolio holder and always has been of the UAP issue, the sole goal of all of that, all of the journalists that have been putting out stories about this, and I personally believe the debunkers, the purpose is to encourage Congress to stop digging. And as soon as Congress stops asking questions, as soon as Congress stops threatening hearings and all of that, that takes the heat off of the intelligence community. It takes the heat off of the Pentagon, and they can continue to just kick this can down the road.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, hopefully that doesn't happen, and I'm positive that we're still going to be moving forward, throughout the rest of this year. But I am an eternal optimist, so we'll see.
I try to be as well.
So one thing that we've been all sort of crying out for in the community is to hear from more whistleblowers. We had David Grush come out and talk about 40 plus more whistleblowers. And I will just caveat, I use the term whistleblower because it's laid out in the NDAA, that it's a whistleblower process rather than, it's not the same maybe as an Edward Snowden. So for anybody, before they start barking at me that I'm using the wrong term, it's just, everyone understands what I'm talking about. But what we had recently was a new whistleblower come forward, Jason Sands, and it's caused a lot of controversy in the community. And I'd just be interested to hear what your take is, after, it's probably been nearly a week since it all came out. What are your thoughts?
To be honest, I'm just not real sure where I sit on it. I'm a bit hesitant. I'd never heard of the guy, not that I would hear about every whistleblower, but from what I understand, there are some red flags that people caught during the interview. So I personally have no knowledge as to whether this guy is the real deal or not. But it does appear there are some red flags. It may just be people misremembering. I mean, if you were to ask me what I did 2 years ago or who I spoke to on such and such date, I probably couldn't tell you. So I understand that over a period of time, and that that those sorts of things can happen. But I just don't know. I'm not in a I don't feel comfortable like hanging my hat on this individual. There's just I just can't say. I hope for both his sake and everyone else's that it does turn out that this guy truly is a whistleblower. Well, I mean, I know he apparently has testified in front of Congress, but I hope it does come out that what he is saying is indeed true, and maybe some of these other details that seem to conflict are just honest mistakes of recollection. But I think I listened to maybe the last, I don't know, 20 minutes of the interview in the spaces, and I had to go to bed. So I haven't even heard the whole thing. So I'm not even up on everything that the guy said.
No, that's absolutely fair enough. I'm in a very similar situation. I have listened to a fair amount of the interview, and there were definitely some questionable. It wasn't so much what he said; it's how he said these things that threw me a bit. But it's difficult, isn't it? Because we want these things, we want these people to be legit and genuine, but these things then just make us kind of err with caution about what they're saying. And, I think in an interview in the last few days, Danny Sheehan has said that Jason Sands contacted him for representation. And after, looking into it, they refused. They turned it down. And
wow,
that's,
that's not good.
No, not at all. So, yeah, I think I'm just going to take a back seat on this one and see how it plays out.
Yeah. And the other thing too, it's like, I would not recommend any whistleblower go onto a Twitter's Spaces. It is a wild mistake to do so. I won't even go on a Twitter Space. I mean, it's a train wreck inside there half of the time, and it's just not a good form to do something like that. And I do think that there is a literal night and day difference between what you heard David Grush say and, from what I understand, everything that this gentleman said. They're just kind of on two totally different planets. I don't think Dave has once said anything that could be contradictory or that would make people question whether he is legitimate in who he says he is and what he has witnessed while he was employed by the intelligence community.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think I'm not willing to write him off completely, just because I know people will say, you're jumping the gun. I'm not. I'm
right.
just being cautious. So
we'll
see how that goes. Yeah, absolutely. We'll wait and see. But, we're into 2024. We haven't had much when it comes to like progress, with the government side of things. There's always talk of more hearings, even field hearings and things like that. And then, we had the UAP DA last year kind of fail. Do you envision there being potentially a 2.0 coming this year? But at the same time, when I think about that, I think about that, we're in an election year, and the closer we get towards sort of November period, this could all be really kind of put back, to the side for a bit to focus on other things that are happening in the world. So what do you think? Do you think we're likely to see any sort of movement with official bills and things like that?
I'm going to hedge my bets and just say I'm 50-50 on it, because I do think that there are, at the moment, as far as how the government, how the administration looks at it, I think that there are bigger fish for them to fry. They've got the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You've got Russia and Ukraine. The administration, of course, is very focused to make sure Donald Trump doesn't get back into the White House, which I think would be just a horrible mistake. One thing that I think when I attended the Seoul conference, I went in there not thinking I knew everything. I'm very new to this whole topic, but thought I had a pretty good handle on it, and on this issue and the sort of implications of it in terms of national security and political stability, societal stability, economic stability, et cetera. And really kind of, and I was only there for the second day. That was all I was able to attend. But my real kind of takeaway from it was that this is a really highly, highly complex issue, fraught with a lot of pitfalls. And there are so many things that, in terms of the consequences of disclosure, that are so difficult to predict what the outcomes will be, that I can understand why a president of the United States would just not want to deal with this. They probably look at it as, this stuff's been around forever. It doesn't seem to have any hostile intent, which I don't necessarily agree with. But we've got so many things on our plate that are potentially geopolitically destabilizing. The last thing we need to throw into the mix is to have a reveal or acknowledgement, or whatever you want to call it, of a NHI presence interacting with us here in the world. If I were the president, I could certainly, not that I would make the same decision, but I could certainly understand the reasoning to put this off just until the point where you just have no choice in doing so. Now, on the other hand, as Colonel Carl Nell discussed in the conference, you then run the risk of a foreign adversary such as China or Russia deciding to disclose first. You also run the risk of this NHI, whatever the hell it is, deciding to do some kind of mass display. At that point, all bets are off in terms of being able to contain or sort of guide the public responses as best you can. And that, of course, is what they refer to as catastrophic disclosure. So the case that myself and Lou and Dave and others make to people in DC is that the best chance you have of managing this whole situation is to let it out in a controlled manner, where you can take steps to mitigate the fallout as best as you possibly can, versus if you don't do that and catastrophic disclosure happens. Number one, if a foreign adversary such as China or Russia were to disclose first, the amount of damage to the reputation of the United States would be absolutely probably immeasurable. Because what would happen would, of course, first thing would be some kind of press briefing, and everybody in the press would be asking, "Is this true?" And of course, the administration would be would have to admit that it is true. Otherwise, if they continue to lie about it and they get caught, the political damage from that will be profound. But if China or Russia goes first and there's a White House briefing, they're going to ask the president or the press secretary, how long has this been going on? How long have you guys been covering it up? How did you cover it up? Who was hurt in the process? Were people killed in the process of covering it up? And oh, by the way, what do you guys know about this whole abduction phenomenon? Is it really true that these things can show up in the bedroom and take my kids up to a ship and perform medical experiments? And then the government says, well, actually, we do know this has been going on and there's nothing we could do about it. So we decided not to say anything. The American public is going to go, what the F? Why were we not told of this physical threat to the members of our family? And people are gonna the legal fallout and the lawsuits that will be brought upon not only the United States government, but the people in the CIA, whoever, because it will come out, the names of the 50-ish or so gatekeepers of this, these senior executive service level people that have been covering it up. The rage that will come from the American public will be profound. So it is, and I'm just speaking about it from the lens of it being an American, but it is to our government's advantage to start this path of reconciliation right away. I think they will find if they come out and say, look, this is what we did. We've hid it for 80 years. At the time, we didn't know what these things were doing or why they were here. We're not really sure now why they're here, but so far nothing, really profound has happened in terms of any kind of military conflict. And you know what, guys, we made a mistake and we did some bad things. We're all human. Humans make mistakes. Humans do bad things. We all do. If they just were to come clean about it now, the path to reconciliation will be much cleaner. It will mitigate as best it can, and perhaps even repair damage to Americans' perception of the trust in government and the trust of the institutions of the United States. It won't be a 100% win, but it is the best win the United States government can hope for if they do the right thing. Come clean about what's happened. The American public can handle it. I guarantee you they can. Probably 90% of the folks will be like, you know what? I always figured this was going on. I'm going to go take my kids to the soccer game. I'll talk to you later. And then they forget about it. So, but if they continue to hide it and they continue to lie and they continue to lie to Congress, which the CIA has been doing, and the Pentagon, it is going to blow up in their face. And as somebody that loves my country and loves democracy, I don't want that. I don't want to see that happen to my country, my government. And I also don't want to see it happen to these folks. You know what? Everybody makes mistakes. They've made mistakes covering this up. But as my mom always told me, it's not the lie that is so bad. It's the covered up and the continued lying to cover the original sin that is the most egregious part.
Yeah, completely agree. Well said. Now, the final thing I wanted to talk about was the release of these Kona Blue files. This is the continuation of ORSAP moving into the Special Access Program under the Department of Homeland Security to be able to bring, materials under their purview, let's say. And, we've heard that name flying around for a few months now, I believe. And, there's a lot of naysayers saying that, look, because Kona Blue never materialized or became anything, that there isn't any crash retrieval programs or legacy programs because it simply didn't happen. But do you see these, that being almost irrelevant? Because for me, I've always been under the impression that these programs were housed in such a gray area with relation to private contractors that it's almost irrelevant whether Kona Blue existed or not. Well, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. To me, the Kona Blue appeared to be some kind of special access program placeholder for a collection of off-world material. So, to me, it further bolsters the case of what David Grush was saying and everybody else that has said. that there indeed is a crash retrieval program. Myself, Josh Boswell, and the legendary Chris Sharp, we published a story in the Daily Mail back in November, detailing to a high level of how the crash retrieval operation was run out of the CIA's Office of Global Access. It's actually called something else now, but we can't talk about that. But the amount of people that we spoke to that had visibility into it, absolutely, it is true. And the Kona Blue file, in my case, in my view, it does nothing but support it. I mean, look, they could, John Greenwald or whoever could produce any kind of document, or the government can produce any kind of document that unequivocally states all of this stuff is true. You're still going to have the Mick Wests of the world and whatnot, the professional debunkers that will just kind of reason their way with not logic, but with illogical reasoning, if that is a word. They're just going to explain anything that comes out of way. So I wouldn't take anything they say with any grain of salt whatsoever in terms of whether they think this is real or not. These folks are not in a good position to provide a good, sound evaluation of that. None of these folks, they don't talk to people in Congress. They don't talk to people in the IC or the DOD, or if they do, they're strictly talking to the people in the Pentagon Public Affairs Office, like Susan Goff. But yeah, I just take it with a grain of salt. I do think the Kona Blue thing is indeed something. Now, on the other hand, they could have released it. The Pentagon could have released it as kind of maybe something to kind of get Congress to calm down, or maybe one way they might try to hope that the document is perceived is that this Kona Blue thing is what David Grush and others have been referring to as the program, and therefore, because it didn't materialize, what Grush was talking about was just a bunch of BS. What David Grush was speaking about in terms of the CR program, it was not Kona Blue.
Yeah, no, I'm on that level as well. Yeah, and I know obviously you do have your sources within the IC, and other friends of both of ours have sources as well. So
absolutely,
yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Well, listen, Matt, it's been a fantastic conversation. We've covered some really important areas here, and obviously you've got this Havana Syndrome interview coming up next week. What else have you got lined up for the future that people can look forward to?
Yeah, we have some great guests coming up. We have Nick Cook, who will be on this Sunday at 12 noon Pacific. The following week, we have astrophysicist Beatriz Villarreal, if I'm saying her name correct. She'll be on the following week. And after that, we have Dr. Avi Loeb, who will be appearing on our show. So we have some really great guests, and I hope everyone will tune in. And man, keep up the great work that you're doing on your show. We are just huge fans of what you're doing, and you have just top-notch guests always, and are just you're such an important voice in this space. And as I always say, there is when it comes to the UAP issue, there is and there's room, and we need many different voices to be discussing this. The more people like yourself and myself and others that are doing this kind of work, the better chance we have of the general public who may not be tracking this issue discovering our individual programs and wanting to look into the UAP issue. So yeah, keep up the great work, and look forward to seeing your next guests as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words. Right back at you, my friend.
Cheers.
Kudos to you. To everyone watching, please, I mean, I'm sure you do, but please make sure you go and subscribe to The Good Trouble Show. Links in the description as well. And as always, guys, thank you so much for the continued support here at Disclosure Team, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.
Thanks, Vinny.
Goodbye.
All right, cheers.